Okay, so this is just going to be off the cuff. So I'm not a professional interviewer, as you know. I'm just a YouTuber. I'm very interested in this kind of thing. So I'm here with Russell Stroud, and I didn't mean to catch you with your eyes closed in the picture.
That's the best picture of me all decade. You're good.
But Russell is the news director of 92.7, a local. What is your all's reach?
We hit mostly the Chattanooga metropolitan area, probably be the best way to put it.
Yeah, so it's one of my, I say new. I've known about you for maybe a year, but I was listening to Jeff. Jeff is the one in the background there. He's the host of the show. I knew about him, and that's another story, right? He left another radio station and came to your radio station, and that's how I found you guys, you and Jen. Jen is is the person behind you. I should have gotten you where you were like turned sideways so I could see Jen.
It's funny you mentioned that though, because everyone complains about how they can't see Jen because of the way the webcam is set up. So it's the ongoing issue.
Yeah, because she has such a nice voice, right? So,
she does, yeah.
I like Jen, and
I
have met in person both Jen and Russell, and I like you guys. I really do. It's kind of one thing to be on the radio and being the news director, right? And it's another. You have your own personal opinions and how you view things.
Sure.
And my interest lies in kind of knowing people more on a personal basis and what they believe and what outside of their work. So I thought it would be interesting to interview you about current events because you're from a younger generation, right?
Sure.
Are you 26? What?
Oh no, you overestimate me. I'm only 24. I turned 25 on the 15th.
And see, Russell started out very young. You say, well, how did a 24-year-old get to be a news director? You started at what age?
I was between 16 and 17 when I started out as an intern, and I fought and clawed my way to the top.
You actually do a very good job, though, and that's why you guys are my new favorite radio station, aside of all the other stuff I complain about.
Well, and I read every one of your complaints and definitely sincerely do take them to heart.
Well, and a lot of that, excuse me again, pollen. A lot of that is just my frustration with current, like the media as a whole, not necessarily 92.7, but in media as a whole. And it seems like it seems like the media, back when I was a kid, growing up, listening to Walter Cronkite, we had 3 channels, 3, 9, 12, right?
Yeah.
And of course, the media was looked at as more of a sort of investigative journalist. You could count on the journalist to dig in and get that story, even if the police weren't investigating or whoever is responsible for investigating. And so now, if you contrast that, what I grew up with, to now the media seems to just have a bias and an agenda that is so blatantly obvious that it's really frustrating for somebody my age.
Sure.
But I digress a little here, and I just wanted to get your take. What would you say if someone asked you the current state of Chattanooga as far as the George Floyd issue and the protest and all that? Because honestly, I have been a little surprised at the numbers of people that have shown up in our small town.
Well, in terms of, I guess I'm going to have to ask you to clarify a little bit regarding my take on that. Do you mean what's my take on the protest situation? What's my take on the police response? What's my take on the public response? It's sort of a multi-layered thing.
The whole thing.
Okay.
Well,
all right.
The thing is, I mean, you've been there. Haven't you been to you've been present there, right?
Yeah, I've been to basically the big ones. On Sunday night, I was there at the courthouse. I got tear gassed. I was there on Friday of last week. And when I'm not there, my colleagues are there, and I get audio clips, and I watch live streams from other people, and I generally stay pretty well informed of what's going on.
That's not exactly representative of the crowd. I was trying to. What do you think the crowd numbers are reaching?
It's difficult. I'm not a very number-oriented person, which is why I'm in radio. But I think that I would say it's in the multiple hundreds for sure. That night you're looking at there, if I'm not mistaken, in fact, I'm probably somewhere just off frame in that picture. That was on Sunday night, one of the first big protests. That would be, let me look at my calendar here. That would be on, I believe, the 31st of May, if I'm not mistaken. That was really the first really, really big protest. The crowd numbers there were really pretty stupendous, although they were dwindling by the time that picture was taken. I'd say we had upwards of 500 people easily.
Yeah, I've heard numbers of 300 to 500.
Yeah.
And
that's about accurate, between 3 and 5.
There's all kinds of issues here, right? There's
Sure.
People peacefully protesting, which I've been pretty proud of the people of our town, our city. Yep. You've got in other cities, groups like Antifa. You have these different groups with their different motivations and biases, and I just wonder, what do you think about? What are your thoughts on? To me, someone in my generation, and I've talked to other people my age, they look at Antifa as just sort of provocateurs, antagonists or whatever. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not really there. They show up at at these times. They're not really interested in the main protest. They're just there. Their purpose is to basically bring down our society. I don't know. That's my impression. And this interview for me is about me kind of wondering about other people's impression. Your impressions mainly.
Sure. So I actually do know people who would call themselves members of Antifa. Antifa is a really complicated topic, actually, because it's not a singular definable entity, if that makes any sense. It's very much decentralized. Probably a good example would be like libertarians, right?
Or anonymous.
Sure. Like libertarians, there's a Libertarian Party, but most libertarians don't call themselves part of the Libertarian Party. They have disparate beliefs and disparate views on things, and there's not one real centralized leader of the libertarians. You know what I mean?
The only problem I have with that is that their activities are very organized.
There are, and that's because they have a manual that they follow, and on a local level they do have leadership, but on a national level it's mostly like Facebook groups and that kind of thing, from my understanding.
Oh, I understand. They can't be everywhere. This one group is not traveling all over the country, right? But,
yeah.
And they do have the playbook, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like it's not so much like anonymous, anon, that these people are totally in it. And when I think of anonymous, I almost think of them as like I don't know. I kind of root for them sometimes, but I don't.
Yeah.
I don't root for Antifa hardly, ever. I root for these protesters, right? And one thing I wanted to state before I even got started, it's a little late for this, but I think what happened to George Floyd was totally wrong on all. There's no justification at all for anything the cop did, and he should be charged with a crime and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Sure.
But what interests me about some of this is how other groups take advantage, and to some extent even Black Lives Matter, and that's the most controversial thing I'll probably talk about.
I think you're right, though, that there are people, there are bad people taking advantage of a bad situation in the midst of good people trying to make a bad situation better.
Right. Have you seen the video of the protesters dragging some of the Antifa guys? There was one where the Antifa guy was trying to dig up a brick out of the landscaping, the paving, right? Mm-hmm. And they drug him off and delivered him to the good guy. The good protesters drug him off and delivered him to the police.
Yeah, that's happened on more than one occasion.
Yeah, and so that's when my hopes are raised.
Yeah, and it's difficult to place a metric right on whether or not that's a legit, like, is that someone who would identify themselves as a member of Antifa, or are they just a radical leftist? Because the line is pretty fine.
Yeah, but it seems to me that Antifa has the perfect cover going. In other words, they're highly organized and they have a stated goal, right? I love you, but you're kind of covering for them a little bit when
Well, I'm just trying to be
they're really
realistic, I think.
they're decentralized, and that sounds like an apologist to, you know what I mean? And
Sure.
they get a lot of that. It's kind of frustrating, really.
It is, and I totally get it. It's just that it is very difficult to find, because they are so decentralized and they're so what would be the word for it, like gaseous almost, like they disappear like vapor once they're caught. That it's difficult to make a straight up determination if someone actually is, like I say, what you would call an Antifa member, or if they're just a radical leftist. Not that there's really such a thing as just a radical leftist.
People who are not organized don't go out and have flags printed up. I mean, this is a very organized group.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying they don't exist, especially in the Pacific Northwest, like Portland. They're absolutely present.
But you're
absolutely.
making it, I know, but you're making it sound like there's just some sort of spontaneous group that dissipates, and then every time something happens, they spontaneously combust, and that's not, that's not how they work. They're very organized. They keep in touch. They have their little secret Discord meetings, I'm sure,
They do, yeah. And they have college groups and Facebook groups and Twitter DM groups and that kind of thing. Yeah.
It's not like it's not like the protests, right? The unorganized protests were spontaneous, obviously. Those people were riled up and upset and had all good reasons to be. So I don't know, and see, that was one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you, interview you, is because I actually wouldn't care if they were, deemed a terrorist, or if all they're interested in is violence, burning down buildings and destroying our society. I have no problem with them being labeled, terrorist group. I know that's probably going to rub you the wrong way because you probably have friends.
Well, no, I mean, I have friends who identify as members of their local like chapters or whatever. Which, by the way, does not mean that I am, because I'm definitely not. You know me. But it's such a difficult topic because on the one hand, they really do go in as agent provocateurs, and that's a real thing that really does happen. But it's also difficult to capture an instance of an individual doing that, because, like I say, they do something and then disappear into the crowd, and they're difficult to find again. And that's kind of what I mean by, in the sense that they just sort of disappear, because you'll see someone who's got the red and black patch, the anarcho-communist patch or flag. Mm-hmm. They'll break a window and then disappear into the crowd, and good luck finding them again. So that's why you have such low numbers of like verifiable cases of like an Antifa member doing X thing. But there's the more famous, like the bike lock case. I think it was in Portland as well, where a dude who's a college professor or an assistant college professor assaulted another guy with a bike lock. And it turned out through investigation that he actually did really have Antifa leanings. So it's, like I say, it's a very difficult topic. It's difficult to breach because on the one hand, in America, you have a right to associate. You have a right to say that you're a member of Antifa and not be arrested just for that. But on the other hand, if they are acting indeed as a domestic terrorist organization, that makes the situation a lot more difficult.
Yeah, I mean, you have a right to peacefully protest.
Yes.
That's what our Constitution says. But
yeah,
that I have seen case after case where, they bring these they'll bring these weapons that look like, just their flagpoles can be turned into a weapon, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't, I'm not trying to turn them into some sort of super, it just seems like the media is, I don't know. It's almost like they're trying to also. I'm looking at these riots. It's almost like they try to justify the the damage, property damage to buildings, burning down buildings, that kind of thing. So
yeah, that sort of rubs me the wrong way as well. During what happened in Minneapolis, where again, a majority of the people who were protesting in Minneapolis, I would say, were what you would largely define as peaceful protesters. But then you also had a decently large number of people, not a majority of people, but a large number of people who actually really were rioting and burning down buildings. And I think that distinction needs to be made, that there is a difference between the two groups, but also you need to acknowledge that the one group really does exist. It really is there.
No, I agree, and that's where the gray, not gray area, but that's where some of the confusion starts to become, the issue becomes more gray, right? Because so I've saw. Why do I feel sorry for a mother who's breaking into a store, stealing food for their kids, and then the other guy's breaking glass to get a big screen TV. They're both illegal, but one plays on your heartstrings.
Well, it's all about intent. I mean, like, intent is like half the law. If you're doing something while technically it is illegal, you're doing it for a quote unquote good reason. You're going to most likely get a lot more leniency in a court.
Would you though? I mean, none of these people are ever going to be prosecuted, right?
Yeah, majority will not be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Building a case on that is really difficult as well, because even just being present, I mean, if you get a lawyer, of course, being present in a building that's actively being looted, if you have a good lawyer, they could just argue that, no, you were just there to check things out. You weren't actually looting. So, I mean, it's difficult, just like everything else. And it's going to be one of those things where we're going to have to look back at it. It's difficult to make determinations on how things are going to go from our perspective now. A lot of these questions that we have are going to be answered a lot later, I think.
Oh, I know the other story I wanted to talk about was, have you heard any more updates on I had this story up here, the two men that were arrested. Honestly, I did not know I knew about one of these guys who was carrying the AR in his backpack. What was the other one?
So Mr. Young was accused of carrying a AR disassembled in two parts, the upper and lower receiver unpinned in a backpack, and then the other man, Kevin Lico, is accused of standing on top of a building with, I believe, 2 rifles and 3 handguns, if I remember right. And in that case, the police made contact with Mr. Lico. They determined that he was intoxicated, and so he was arrested on a charge of possession of a handgun while under the influence, if I recall correctly. Mr. Young, on the other hand, was hit with a charge of unlawful possession of a firearm with intent to go armed, resisting arrest, and I believe disorderly conduct, if I recall correctly.
The first person was Trevon Young.
Trevon Young, yes. He's a 29-year-old Army veteran, African American.
And he claims he was actually going there to support the protests.
Yeah, he actually did have a sign that listed 2 names. If I recall correctly, it was Duncan Lemp and Brianna White. And he was protesting, if I recall correctly, no knock warrants. Because he's I think I can pretty confidently say this, he's a Second Amendment supporter, libertarian kind of guy. So his purpose for being there, yeah, you can see his sign in that second picture there.
This one?
Yep.
Okay.
There you go. Breonna Taylor, I'm sorry, not Brianna White.
Okay, so this is him. Why was he reported in the first place?
Well, that's kind of the difficult question. The police claim that they received a tip about Mr. Young, but as far as I know, they've not said where they received the tip from. And then he was stopped by a police officer, or at least they attempted to stop him twice as he was walking along. They asked him to stop so they could talk to him twice. He said no, which arguably is your right to do. He kept walking. So then they grab him by the arm And I don't know if reflexively or if intentionally, he pulled his arm away, and several officers then grabbed him and took him to the ground, and he was taken into custody.
I think, and what did you say? He arguably had a right to do. What was he that he had a right to do? Not respond or
to keep walking. So you could argue, and this is going to be something I'm sure they'll bring up in court. Was the request to stop a lawful order, or was it a, hey, I want to talk to you, or was it you stop? There's going to be a distinction to be made there. Again, it's very complicated.
To be honest with you, if I know I've got an AR in my backpack, I'm probably going to be cooperate as much as I can.
Sure.
Because I don't want to seem as if I don't want to, and that's my only advice to people doing this. No matter what color you are, is that if you really are interested in helping your cause, you and I are big Second Amendment guys, right? We're gun guys. I was in 2013. We had several rallies at the state capitol, right? This is the capital, and people were open carrying ARs and there's sidearms and all this stuff, and the state police were there. Everything was peaceful, and we were all talking to the state police. We were having a good time, right? We weren't there. Our demeanor showed them that we were not there to cause a problem, Yeah. I think that's the way to peacefully protest, I have a video on it. You can go look and see. It was a big crowd, and I feel like that. Maybe things were, the message got across to our state government,
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Peace is the way to go.
So my question is, why it seems like, now I'm on this guy's side, right? The only thing I'm saying is that there's this culture out there. When you mix this culture of, F the cops, and you see all these videos of these young people, and I'm saying it's the younger generation, almost testing the what would it be, fortitude, or the, they're testing the ability of the police officer, or their mental state, or what would be the word? What would be the term?
They're sort of testing waters, playing with fire.
Yeah, it's almost as if they're there to be, confronted. And my only suggestion, or advice, and I know younger people aren't going to take advice from me, but my advice to these people is, if your heart is in the right place, and you're really trying to support protest, and you're really trying to exercise your Second Amendment rights, do it in a more pleasant way, because you're going to get, if that had been me, I have actually, I've been pulled over before.
Sure.
I actually just recently had to take a driver safety course because I got 2 speeding tickets in the same year, right?
Oh, that's a fun time.
I know, and it was actually a pretty good course. But when I was pulled over, I would pull out my driver's license and my CCW, my handgun carry permit, and I would hand it to them at the same time, and they were cool with it, right? They're cool. Now, a lot of people would criticize me for that, because they would say, "Oh, you don't have to show that. You don't have to, until you're asked for it or whatever." But it's all about setting the tone of the situation,
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I think that it's all about as much respect as possible, as much de-escalative tactics on both your side and on the police officer side as possible, because you don't want to make things any more tense than they need to be. If you're relaxed, they're relaxed, sort of thing. The case of Mr. Young is very difficult, because there's a lot of information that's missing, and a lot of it at this point is he said, she said, they did, because you have the police with one story and Mr. Young's lawyer with another story. So it's, I don't know.
Now,
we'll have to wait till the court case.
I support him, and I hope that things turn out well for him.
Sure.
I don't want people to think I'm speaking negatively of him, because I support what he was trying to do. But I just think, how many battles do you want to fight, in a given situation,
It's one of those things where it's perhaps good intentions, but executed poorly. So the court case will determine what exactly is missing in the story, and I think that there is quite a lot of detail missing.
Now, we must also state that in Tennessee, you have to have a handgun carry permit to open carry a loaded rifle, right? You can't open carry a rifle where the ammunition is close or within, I guess, arm's reach or hand's reach or whatever.
I think they say within reasonable reach or something like that.
So if you have your loadout vest or whatever, and you've got mag pouches on the front of your chest, and you've got your rifle on your back, that's not allowed. But unless you have a concealed carry permit, and the reason I bring that up is because he didn't have a handgun carry permit, right?
Right, which kind of surprises me. The police department states that he did not have a Tennessee issued handgun permit, which on the one hand surprises me given what I know about him. But on the other hand, I get the feeling, and please keep in mind, this is my speculation. I get the feeling that he thought his bases were covered by having the weapon disassembled in his backpack. Because remember, the upper and lower were separated.
Right.
So I get the feeling he thought his bases were covered there by not having the rifle assembled.
You can transport it in your car, but you can't. He had it concealed, so you can't conceal that.
Yeah, and you have to keep in mind too that in America and in Tennessee, the lower of an AR is what counts as the firearm. The upper doesn't matter at all, aside from like pistol rifle, differentiations. But the lower is what counts as the gun.
Right, that's the actual serialized portion or the part of the rifle is the lower.
It doesn't matter what state of assembly the rifle is in, as long as you have a serialized or any kind of lower that can accept parts, that counts as the gun.
But you could have, it would be different if he had a lower that wasn't, it was a strict lower, I think, right? Just carrying it in a backpack, you're just carrying parts around, even though that's the legal part of the firearm. Mm-hmm. It's not something that could have easily been assembled because, on an AR, you're just putting, you got your two pins and you're together.
Yeah. I do kind of wonder, though, that's an interesting sort of thought experiment, I guess. If he just had just a bare stripped lower in his backpack, I wonder if they would have, because technically speaking, that meets the definition. I wonder if they would have nailed him on that.
Yeah, I think this is where you get into intent, but I think in any case, in Tennessee, the castle doctrine extends to your car.
Yes.
The reason I'm bringing it up is because it's the difference between having a handgun carry permit or not. Is you don't have to have a handgun carry permit to carry a rifle, in your car or your firearm in your car, right?
Right.
But once you take it out and you start toting it around, then it's where you get into the gray area, And if
and that's where
hunting, they only see there's the term with the intent to go armed. That's going to be part of the law, with the intent to go armed. So once you take it out of your car, you put it in the backpack, and you got a couple of pins, snap it together. And was he intending to go armed? So that's what they're going to say now. I don't think he was. Personally, from all that I've read, I don't think that his intent was to go armed and hurt anyone.
No, and I did interview for the radio a friend of his who was number one appalled that he was arrested in the first place, but number two said that he's not only is he a great guy, he's a big Second Amendment advocate, and he was actually there to support Black Lives Matter in these particular cases. So why in the world would he go then with ill intent? Doesn't really make any sense.
Right. And the other fella, what was the other fella's name?
Kevin Leko, I believe.
How do you spell his name?
Leko.
Leko.
Yes.
Leko. He's I better hush.
Be nice now.
He's an interesting looking fella. He looks like me. What am I saying?
He looks like me in 30 years.
Man loaded with loaded AK-47 arrested on rooftop. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a very odd case.
This is not. That's not Chattanooga, is it?
Yep.
What happened to the trees that were over here?
Oh, that's that photo is of Nashville, but the story is of Chattanooga.
That's what I'm saying. This is
Oh,
Nashville.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That's not Chattanooga. Uh, why is it showing that picture? And that's what was confusing me, because I thought I recognize that. That's where I've been there. Tell me the quick story. Tell me what you know about him right quick while I'm trying to pull up.
Sure. So, Mr. Lico is accused of standing on a rooftop carrying a rifle. I believe the rifle he's accused of carrying was an AK variant of some kind. I think it was an Arsenal, if that means anything. And he also had apparently some handguns. Really, the amount of weapons doesn't particularly matter. The fact that there was one is the matter of question. But he was allegedly intoxicated at the time while standing on top of this building with multiple firearms, and so he was charged with unlawful possession of a firearm while intoxicated, or possession of a handgun while intoxicated, I believe.
But I am kind of confused about why he was on the roof. That's kind of odd.
It is odd, and the story goes that he was concerned about potential rioting and looting, which, if you know about the protests in Chattanooga, seems a little bit unreasonable to me. But he apparently had some sort of, in his mind, legitimate concern about rioting and looting, and wanted to look after his building to protect his own safety. The police department was tipped off about him being on the roof because people could see him. A friend of mine who was there that night, I was not, but a friend of mine who was there that night said that he actually could see him from their vantage point. So the police make contact with him on the roof. There's no violent actions go on. From what we can tell, the interaction between the police and Mr. Lico was peaceable, but they allegedly find a six-pack of beer in a bag.
Yeah, he says he had two 9mm handguns. Hopefully they were Glocks, and a revolver. And,
no, they're Tauruses.
What, High Point or whatever?
Yeah, High Point.
Lico also had 6 beers in his bag. At least he was ready, right? He was.
Yeah.
But he was also he was already intoxicated, so that's bad.
Yeah, so that's
bizarre. I haven't heard that much about this story.
Yeah, because there's really not a whole lot of controversy regarding it. Once you read the details, again, assuming the police affidavit is truthful, once you read the details, you sort of go, "Oh, okay, I get it."
Yeah.
So there's been some controversy regarding his case because his bond was set significantly lower than Trevin Young's bond, which certainly on his face looks to be a little bit suspicious because of obviously the racial disparity between the two gentlemen. But on the other hand, in playing devil's advocate, Trevin Young did have 2 additional charges compared to Kevin Lico, who had 1. So I can understand on its face.
Did you say Kevin did have a handgun carry permit?
I don't know.
Oh, so I'm sure there's probably some details we're not. But on the face of it, that does seem kind of bizarre because I'm not going to say just the optics of it. Being on the roof is kind of. You would think that he would have the same bail or whatever.
Yeah, it seems kind of strange, and that's where the allegations of there's a racial factor at play here.
Yeah.
And frankly, I don't know. Certainly, it could be, but I don't know.
I'm not gonna brag here, but I was raised in a family where color was never we were taught to see people as people. I have a very diverse set of friends, and especially in the 2A community, and I don't get. That's why I have a hard time understanding why we're still looking at these police officers doing what they're doing when with George Floyd. Why did this guy feel that he had to leave his knee on the guy's neck for 6 or 7 minutes? I don't get that.
Yeah, and for people like us, where I'm sure we were taught the same way growing up, that you judge people not based on their skin color, but based on just who they are as people. For us, it's kind of difficult to understand why do people act in racist ways, because we were brought up to not be that way.
Yeah.
it's difficult to understand.
The only other thing, and this is where it might get a little controversial with me, is that I was also taught that, how do I say this? Each incident, in this case, it's not isolated. I don't mean to say that it's isolated as in there are no other black men, being killed by police. I'm saying that I was taught that to treat each thing, it's on its own merits. So if that police, not if, but when that police officer committed that crime, he should be arrested and prosecuted, right? On the other hand, I wasn't raised to believe that every police officer is a racist, and so when I hear groups like Black Lives Matter saying that I can't say certain words, even now I'm even hesitating. You see, I think this is where it gets really difficult, because I agree, obviously, that there's a problem. I don't think I can't go so far as to say it's systemic, because how do I say, where I'm going with this? Each case needs to be looked at, and if these groups are taking advantage of this to create this atmosphere of defunding the police, for example, it just doesn't work. It's not gonna. You can't have this nationwide shutdown. Every time, or riots. Every time something like this happens. I
think that the Minneapolis problem is a Minneapolis problem. But on the flip side, I think that it's, just from my personal view, I think that it is positive to shine a light on the potential issue there may be with police use of force doctrine in regards to not just the black community, but to everyone. Perhaps we should have a little bit more kinder and gentler approach to police interactions with people.
I agree 100%. Don't get me wrong. But that's being translated to, or being turned into, just do away with the police, police departments altogether.
Yeah,
and maybe the Minneapolis Police Department needs to be restructured or whatever, or torn down and rebuilt. But these people are saying that they want life without police.
And that's the thing, is that in Minneapolis, you're right. In Minneapolis, it may very well be that their police department is just corrupt to the core and needs to go, and they need to restructure entirely. I don't think, in my personal opinion, and again, just my opinion, I don't think that then carries over to Chattanooga, where our police department definitely does have issues for sure, but they do seem to be taking legitimate, good faith strides at reform.
Right, and you've heard Chief Roddy talk about what was the most recent policy he just put into place, that if a police officer sees another police officer doing something wrong, that it's going to be policy now that he has to intervene.
Yes, it's a duty to intervene.
Right, and I was glad to hear that.
I just reported on it this morning, and I can't remember.
Because it's hard to understand when I watched the video of how these other officers didn't intervene. Mm-hmm. I will say that. Because if I'm sitting there watching somebody being strangled, I'm gonna step in.
Yeah.
Whether I'm a bystander or a police officer or whatever.
And hopefully that measures like that will clear up a lot of the fraternistic, or however you say that word, the sort of fraternity-like nature that a lot of police departments appear to have, where it's, we're not going to tell on one another. If you make a policy that you have to intervene, that hopefully will clear up a lot of that issue.
Where was that reported? I remember hearing that story this morning too. That's what.
Well, you know what? I actually can pull up my document. I can quote it directly if you'd like. Yeah, so Chief Roddy says that it's a duty to intervene. Every department member, this is from their code of conduct, every department member has a duty to intervene and stop any other member from committing an unlawful or improper act, including but not limited to acts of brutality, abuses of process, abuses of authority, and any other criminal acts or major violations of department rules and procedures. Successful intervention does not negate a duty to report.
I think that's positive, like you were saying.
Sure.
Yeah.
Definitely a step in the right direction. And there are going to be more reforms proposed. In fact, tonight at 6, tonight being Tuesday the 9th at 6 o'clock p.m., the Chattanooga City Council is going to be doing its online meeting. And I expect we're going to be hearing a lot in the public comment section.
That's cool. What other stories? I can't. It's funny because when I'm just Googling by myself, all these stories just pop right out like off the screen at me.
Yeah.
And when I'm doing it now, I can't. You can't find it at all.
Yeah. Well, the I know I have the same problem. The police issue, the protest issue, is definitely the number one, and probably will be for another few days. We have, of course, had a few violent crimes in recent days. Tornado cleanup is not over. Still working on that, unfortunately, for all the victims involved there. But other than that, Chattanooga's been pretty calm, pretty peaceful, which is good for the people who live here and not very good for me who has to report on stuff that goes wrong. Not that I want things to go wrong, of course.
How have you all had changes in your programming? Like it seems sometimes, like I'll turn, and maybe it's just the way I listen. Sometimes I'll turn on the radio and it's Glenn Beck, and then another time I'll turn it on and it seems like it's Keon doing sports. Is that all pretty much like the schedule's settled? I mean, it doesn't change on a daily basis.
I don't want to give too many tricks away, but that time slot in particular that you're referring to is one that we're working around a lot. There's a lot of finagling that goes on in that particular hour. It's complicated. Programming's not my forte.
That's good. No, at least I'm not going crazy.
No, you're not. You're not.
That's good. Good.
In fact, tomorrow I hear it's going to change up even more. So I don't know. It's just
they should let me and you do a talk show about current events or something like that.
Sure, it'd be fun. I'll just I'll mark out an hour.
We could just we could counter things Jeff says on. I'm just kidding.
Countering Jeff is like an all-day affair, and sometimes I just don't bother because I know Jeff can say what he wants. I'll put it that way. I love Jeff, but he can say what he wants.
And it's not like you can get. But I saw him beat down. I don't know if you know much about Jim Reynolds over at WGLW.
A little bit. I've never worked with him, but I know about him.
When I was in my, this is like 25 years ago when I first started listening to WGLW. He was like, grade A, number one conservative, right? Libertarian, I should say. I should say conservative libertarian. Because I'm not like ultra right wing, right?
No, I got you.
And now he got to where right before Jeff left, he would not even like counter anything. It would be like and I would be like, I'd even call in and say, "What is going on with you, Jim? Why can't you? Where's my conservative voice? Where's my libertarian voice? What happened?"
Well, that's what happens when you've been doing it for 30 years, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want you to ever get that way.
Well, I'll certainly try not to. I don't know where I'll be in 30 years. I may not even be alive in 30 years, given how my career constantly beats me up all the time. But we'll see.
Well, I mean, that's actually a good question for you. Where do you see do you aspire to become work for a larger network, or how does that?
Well, that's a good question, actually, because where I am right now is very, very unique in the sense that our radio station is very small in terms of personnel. We have a giant signal, but very small staff. In fact, in that screenshot you're showing on screen right now, that's a good half of the company.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I've been with it for about 8 years now. Helping the company grow, very much involved in operations aside from just news. I would certainly love to be doing not just what I'm doing right now, but I'd certainly love to be still with the company in some capacity 30 years from now for sure.
That's cool. Because I hate to lose you locally here, because sometimes, younger people, they've got these goals and They aspire to be, and rightfully so, right? Aspire to bigger things, and then they leave Chattanooga or the area, and we kind of lose those assets.
That's one thing that I can say with a good degree of certainty. I don't now, and I can't imagine I ever would have any intention of leaving the Chattanooga area. I love it here. There's too much opportunity here. I wouldn't want to live in Atlanta. I don't have any friends there. All my friends are in Chattanooga. Why would I want to move?
Yeah, Atlanta would be awful.
For many reasons.
I've spent a good bit of time down there, and it's awful. Well, that's
Plus,
cool.
I'd have to memorize a whole bunch of new street names and names of different public officials, and I wouldn't want to have to do that.
I think Jeff doesn't know me, that well. He doesn't know me at all, really. But if I got a chance to ever talk to him, like you and I are talking, he would realize that I'm not. It's my thing with him and Trump. His Trump bashing on a daily basis is not. People get this wrong all the time about me. Is that I'm a super big Trump fan, right? I just want to hear some objectivity every now and then.
Yeah, and unfortunately, and I know this is hard to believe, but a lot of it is him just venting because it's radio and it's whatever frustration at politics he saw on TV the last night were sort of coming to a head. It's difficult for me to articulate, but I am with you in the sense that I'm sort of placed there to be balanced to some degree, although sometimes that's a little bit difficult when I agree with him, although not to the extreme that he's expressing. like for instance, the issue in Lafayette Square where the protesters were dispersed. Personally, I thought that was a bad move. I wouldn't say that the president should be thrown out of office because of it, but I did think it was strategically very unsound.
Well, and it's like this thing, like today when Trump tweeted about this, the older fellow that the police shoved over, and he, busted.
Oh, he fell and cracked his head. Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's a bit much. Even if the guy was an Antifa member, he's still an old guy, right? And you're not going to push him to the ground. And then Trump tweets this thing, about this conspiracy theory. Well, okay, so let's just say let's say the guy did have intentions of, antagonizing the police or whatever his intentions were. It doesn't go over well with me, when the police act the way they did. If they said, okay, we've had enough of you, we're going to detain you or whatever, turn around, we're going to put you in cuffs for a while just to, slap you on the wrist. But you can't go around pushing these old guys down no matter what's, you know what I mean? You got to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I've got on riot gear, I've got batons, I've got tear gas, I've got taser, I've got everything I need to defend myself against an 80-year-old man.
Yeah, what's the present threat? The present threat is an 80-year-old man.
Yeah, so what is the threat, But I don't know. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm kind of throwing Jeff a bone here when I'm saying I'm not going to defend everything Trump does or says. I think sometimes he does need to. Sometimes he does need someone, operating his Twitter account. I always criticize, politicians who let, or any, big personality who lets someone tweet, on their behalf. This is my.
Oh yeah.
That's annoying, but in this case, sometimes it might not hurt. But
have a staffer dedicated to that.
Yeah, let a staffer and just say this from now on. The staffer, I'm going to say things, and they're going to translate it for public view for me.
Filter it, yeah.
So it's not like I'm some huge defend Trump to the death thing. I feel like, especially the alternative, and I hate hearing this myself, but I think the alternative is a lot worse, and I kind of fear for, I'm pretty sure he'll be reelected, and after that, I'm not really sure what's going to happen.
I feel pretty confident that you're right in that. We'll see. I'm certainly open to any possibility, but it seems right now pretty likely their reelection is going to happen. But hey, we'll see.
Well, I mean, who would you, if you had another choice, what would who would you be looking at? Who are the 24-year-olds looking at right now?
Well, I can't speak for any other 24-year-old. If I could wave a magic wand, I'd probably put Ron Paul in the president's in the Oval Office.
Oh, I would love that. Now, see, now we're talking business,
Right?
I never have really, and I understand it, but it's these doctors who become politicians really have a hard time because, I don't know, they're too nice to be politicians to a certain extent.
Yeah.
It's like, what's his name? Human HUD director.
Ben Carson.
Ben Carson, good Lord, how can I forget his name? I love the guy. Look at him, and perfect example of a good guy, smart guy. What is he? Brain surgeon, right?
Yeah, neurosurgeon.
Yeah, and you hear him speak, and you're like, this guy doesn't speak with authority, so people take advantage of that, But yeah, Ron Paul, heck, I voted for his dad. 20 years ago? What year was that he was running? It's been a long time ago.
Ron Paul ran in 2012. Rand Paul, his son, was a candidate in 2016.
Wait a minute. I thought we were talking about Rand Paul all this time. You were talking about Ron Paul?
Yeah, I was talking about Ron Paul.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine. Either one. Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind Rand either, personally.
That's who I was talking about as being a doctor. Rand Paul has done all these things. He's, gone overseas and helped, done these Doctors Without Borders things and all this stuff. And I really loved his response when it came to the COVID virus,
Yeah.
He was one of the more level-headed people of all of them, really.
Yeah, it's important to be measured in response to these disasters.
Yeah. Yeah, and you see where, just today, this morning, or yesterday, where the WHO, kind of backed
the Who's and Whoville.
Yeah, they backed off on their thoughts on asymptomatic people and their ability to, spread COVID. Did you see that?
I did see that. Yeah, they said it's the instances of asymptomatic people spreading COVID-19 were actually very low, which is certainly good news.
Right. And it answers why all the young people that I know, my kids, never got sick, because they were, I would have to, when Alex was always wanting to go out and visit with his friends, and he would be like, oh, we'll stay 6 feet apart. We're just going to go hiking. We'll wear a mask, whatever we have to do. And I was like, dude, you're going to get, back during that time, we thought everybody was going to get it, right?
Yeah.
But nothing, none of his friends. Did you ever actually know anybody who had gotten sick?
I don't believe so. I don't believe I've known anyone firsthand. I'm 2 people removed from a few people who have gotten it, but I don't personally know anyone. As far as I know, it could be asymptomatic. Who knows?
Here's my thing, and I'm going to say this. It's going to sound crazy, but I think I actually had it, and the test was a false negative. And
that wouldn't surprise me.
This is why, because I hadn't been sick in years, and just happened to get the exact same symptoms, right? Mm-hmm. And I couldn't get a test for 3 or 4 days after I felt better. I was already feeling better. Like I was asymptomatic Monday, and I couldn't get my test till that Wednesday. And I even told the nurse when she was testing me, my nose is really dry. I don't feel like that this test is going to be very accurate, because I don't know how, my nose was literally so dry, just like it is now, that there's no mucus in there.
What are you going to sample?
Where are you going to get this? And of course I found out that it goes way deep. So, I was surprised.
I think it's a skin sample more than anything.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I get it now. I know now you're just, the back of the throat's where you're reaching. And, but I really think that, I don't know, something tells me that a lot more people got it and got over it, or have, had it and didn't have any symptoms, and that it's going to turn out to be no more harmful than the common cold. So
I certainly hope that that's the case. Fortunately, I can only speak for Chattanooga, but fortunately in Chattanooga / Hamilton County, our mortality rate is, and of course every case is a tragedy, but our mortality rate is very low, which is definitely good.
Well, nationally, it's only like, 0.26 or something, I think I read.
Yeah, I think we're at 101,000 dead right now, total.
Yeah, I'd rather look at the percentage because that 100,000
Sure.
seems to be high. But I am going to claim that that's a high number because of all the stories I've read of where people who have died were just listed as COVID when they weren't necessarily tested.
Yeah, I've heard stories about that too. And in my position as a news guy, there's a lot of stuff that you hear that you can't repeat because you're sort of sworn to secrecy. And I'll just say that I have definitely heard of that happening from people who would know, and it's a little bit disturbing to me.
And I guess just if I have to practice my own objectivity, the other side of that would be the number of people who weren't tested and died. And so, I guess as an average, I guess you can. But I don't know, something tells me that there are more people who have died of just not natural causes, good Lord. I mean, like heart, I'll be honest with you, and I haven't even told my wife this, but I'll tell you. Mm-hmm. I actually had some weird heart rhythms during that period.
Oh, that's disturbing.
Yeah, it is disturbing. Now, it's going away, right? And maybe that was stress or something from thinking, I'm going to die or whatever. No, I never really thought that. I'm just kidding. But but it was bizarre because I had the only symptom I didn't have was the sense of taste. I didn't quite understand that one but I have this, because I'm half deaf and half blind, I have this super heightened sense of smell and taste anyway. And so it may be, like I smell things all the time that people will say, what are you talking about? So I don't know, maybe I just didn't notice it, but I do wonder how many people were tested, just had false. And I'm not going to criticize the testing facility because, God bless them, they were doing the best they could. But it was a little rough. It was a gravel drive through, down in the hood. It was, they were doing their best, right? But I'm just not so sure about the conditions that it was done under. And
there's a lot of weird stuff going on with that too, because I got really sick in January, I'm wanting to say, and I actually had to take a few days off because of how just horribly sick I was. And it turned out, give it a 2 months later, we find out about COVID-19, and looking back, I'm like, man, all the symptoms that I had were the exact same symptoms they list for COVID-19. So it kind of makes you wonder. Also, around that same time, you may recall, this made headlines in, I believe, Sequatchie County, maybe Bledsoe County. They actually had to close down a couple of school districts, a couple of school buildings because of a mysterious illness that swept through that they couldn't figure out.
I still think that it was here before we realized it.
I wouldn't be surprised because there was no testing for it.
Because when I was following this guy, I don't know why. I have no idea. There was an Irish. This is the most bizarre thing you're going to say. There was an Irish guy who was teaching in Wuhan, right? And he was a vlogger. Now you can probably find this if you just look up on YouTube. Sure. And he was like one of the first people vlogging about it when they shut down Wuhan, when they shut down the city. And it was very bizarre because he would show the video of Wuhan, like a few days before and then after, and it was just very bizarre looking. It was like a Orwellian, or apocalyptic, scene where there was nobody literally on the streets in this city of 1 million people or whatever, maybe multiple millions of people, but this was way back when did it first. I was thinking even then. I was watching his videos and I was thinking, how does this not? If it's that contagious, how is it not in the United States in a week? From all the flights. If you're on a plane, you've been on a plane before, right? You're breathing that air. You can't escape. You can't escape breathing the air that everybody else breathes.
Yeah, you smell the guy 10 seats away from you.
Oh, it's just awful.
It's horrible.
I was stuck on a plane for 10 hours one time, and I thought I was going to die. And I almost opened the door. I was like sitting beside the door. I'm like, I'm going to open this sucker. But
yeah, you wish the windows open.
Yeah, roll down the windows. Are we 10,000 feet yet? But I don't know. And I didn't mean to get off on a COVID tangent, but I do find it. We've had this year. We've had this perfect storm of almost ruin to our nation, to our country, and our economy.
Yeah, it seems like everything that could go wrong has gone wrong.
My sons are they're so different, and I know every father probably thinks this. That they don't represent the current, like what you would think of as current youth in America.
Sure.
I have never actually tried to influence them. When I first started having kids, I said, I'm not, here's some rules. I'm not going to try to tell them they have to believe in, or I'm not going to try to affect their religion or their politics. That was 2 rules that I set out for myself when I was 24 years old. I wasn't much I was your age when I first started, when I had Barrett, okay? And I said to myself, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to tell him what to believe at all, religion, politics, or anything. And I think that all I did was try to be a good example, right?
Yeah.
Now, I did play Ozzy Osbourne, and, I did play some good music for them when they were little.
I think that's a good example.
I did play good music for them when they were in the truck with me, right? So I did influence them. They're both musicians now, so that's good.
That's awesome.
Very talented musicians. But the reason, I guess, all that to say is that when I look at other young people, it's they're foreigners, they're aliens to me, because I don't understand how they got this sort of bizarre attitude that they have,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people my age are, I should say, they're kind of like Uber consumers, in the sense that we're all sort of obsessed with like the whole social media thing, and that influences us to such a great degree that our culture, like youth culture, is so different from how it used to be, because we form new ideas and new cliques so quickly. It's 21st century kids are weird, man.
I don't know. There just seems to be too much groupthink, too much herd mentality, too much control of thought. With the way things work, you would think that there would be some individuality being practiced, but it doesn't. I don't know. But anyway, that's why I'm interested in what you have to say, and I appreciate you spending this time with me, and I hope maybe sometime you can come back.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny we went all this time without me mentioning. I've actually been a huge fan of yours since I was, like a kid, man. Like when YouTube was new. I think one of the first channels I watched was yours, because you were uploading really early on.
Oh yeah, I was in 2006, and I was actually using YouTube as a backup. I had lost a hard drive, and it made me so mad. I was like, I got to find a source because I knew at that time, even YouTube it wasn't owned by Google at that time, but I knew they had to have triple redundancy on their servers, right? So I was just uploading videos just to save them, and I would edit them for the family and put music to them. And when I became a YouTube partner, I had to get rid of a lot of those because of the copyrighted music I had in the. I know what I was going to say. I used to do this thing called Monday Night Live. It was like a show, and I would have pretty decent sized YouTubers on, And granted, most of them were in the gun community, but they were still, now those YouTubers have millions of subscribers. But
I remember those.
I got kind of burnt out on the whole thing because it seemed like we almost ran out of things to talk about, or maybe I don't know. I got burnt out on, we did like 60 shows and I got old really fast after, at some point. But I ran out of big YouTubers to interview. But,
yeah, unless you're getting paid to do it, it gets to be kind of a slog. There's no motivation.
Yeah, and even though I was, had the, advertising going in the background or whatever, AdSense, it wasn't. My channel never really kicked off. I never really commercialized it like it probably didn't have the ability to, like somebody like Hickok or Iraq 8888. Those people really seized that moment and figured out how to do that, and I respect them for that. But I just never. I don't know. Maybe I didn't have the desire to do that. But anyway, in any event, what I'm trying to say is I hope you'll come back sometime and I can. We can do this again.
And it would be an honor. I'd love to.
Fun for me. I was raised by the greatest generation, right?
Right.
I wasn't part of the great generation, but I certainly was raised partially by them, and so there's a huge difference in the way people view our country that's my age and between me and but I have hope because I know people like you and thankfully my own sons, my own children, who hopefully will keep this thing going, our country going. But sometimes, honestly, I literally honestly wonder if we're not within 50 years of losing.
Yeah, I wonder the same thing, and there is definitely a heightened amount of cynicism especially in people my age, and I think some of it is justified. Personally, I believe that the problem is not America in the sense that America as it was founded. The problem is that we've gone so far from how we were founded. We need to go back to basics.
I think that the education system has failed to a certain extent also. I think that young people, or just some people, I'm not saying just young people, there are older people who don't understand that the ingredients that it takes to have a country like ours. And the reason it was so successful, or it has been in the past, is that idea that first, our economic system, capitalism, and security, safety and security. Those two things. If you can make people keep them safe, then you can keep them free. And if you have an open, that laissez-faire economic atmosphere as much as you can, then people can do what they want to do. It doesn't matter who you are. You can do whatever you want to do. I'm not very successful, but I'm doing exactly what I want to do because my mother taught me when I was a little kid, you can do whatever you want to do. And it was just a simple thought. It wasn't, she didn't preach it. She didn't stand on a soapbox and say it, but she said, you can do whatever you want to do. And she would say, what is it? And I would say, I want to build things, and she would buy me Legos. This was when I was 4 or 5 years old, right? So that by the time I got to high school, I wasn't going to settle for just a standard high school, right? I had it, and that's where it began, And there's something that is wrong. Now, if there's anything systemically wrong with our country, it's this idea that we don't live in a great country, and that everything about it is wrong, and that people can't, and that being successful there's no sin in being successful, and that they don't teach the ingredients or the method or the reason, how we got to where we are and how we keep it. How we keep it is what's being lost right now. The idea that young people think that we can literally defund or get rid of whole police departments and nothing will come of that.
I think, personally, I think it's an interesting experiment. I don't think it will go very well, but I think it's an interesting experiment.
No, and maybe we need that. Maybe the Minnesota Police Department can be torn apart, and Minnesota is far away from Tennessee.
Right, exactly.
and I told Barrett the other day. I said, you know what, we're in the wrong business. We need to start delivering cocaine instead of 2x4s. Because if the police go away, we can do whatever the heck we want and make a lot more money than what we're doing right now. You know?
Well, unfortunately for you still have the DEA.
No, I'm talking about all law enforcement has to go away, right?
Oh, all of it. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, they have to. I'm on board with it, man.
Let's try it.
I'm just kidding, but you see, they don't do that thought experiment. They don't. What happened to the what happened to when? And I used to drive Alex. He's kind of gifted, and he's like a little rocket scientist. And I would say, I would do these thought experiments, and he would get mad. He'd be like, "Oh, Dad, come on, do we have to do this again?" But people, what happened to that? What happened to parents or even the education system saying, "Let's do a thought experiment." There's no police, and here's the crime statistics in our city right now. What happens? What happens the day the police don't exist?
I think if there is any sort of, like you say, any sort of systemic problem, I agree. I think that a lot of it is with education, and not by any fault of the teachers necessarily, because I think I know a lot and they do a great job. But it's just the constant insistence on standardization, where every kid is rubber stamp, all got to be the same standards. I'm biased because I was homeschooled. I didn't go to school. I was educated at home, fortunately for me. So maybe I have a little bit of bias, but I think that there's a lot of reform that needs to be done when it comes to the education system, for sure.
I can't agree more. I mean, I know a bunch of people who were homeschooled, and they're very smart, very intelligent, and they're not like weirdos,
No, that's the big misconception. But granted, I am a weirdo.
No, yeah, but that's what I was going to say. They're not all like Russell. I'm just kidding. But they kind of are a little bit, but it's okay. They're quirky, but they're perfectly, most of the homeschoolers I know are smarter than, unfortunately, if you put the same number of people, say I know 10, and you put 10 people up against publicly educated, people, public school, it's going to be night and day. Unfortunately, the homeschool kids are going to clean the clock when it comes to, and I know you just talked about standardized testing, but if you come up with a measure of intelligence and put them together. And anyway, I can't say enough about good homeschool, because my in-laws, my wife's aunt homeschooled like 6 kids, and every one of them was sharp as a tack, right?
Yeah.
And I would not even dare challenge them to any sort of math test or science history test. Pick a subject. And here's the thing, okay? And I know people aren't going to like this, okay? But people who are homeschooled were raised in an atmosphere, this is my experience, okay?
Okay.
Where religion was not beat down on them, but it was kind of a part of the culture, right? So I'm not saying that, how do I say it? I'm just saying the culture of homeschooling and that type of education, the culture surrounding it is more open and free. And so you have kids who don't feel, they're not oppressed on a daily basis.
They're not told what to think all the time, ironically enough, given that they're at home.
Yeah, and they're not taught, it's nothing is politicized. This is what people get wrong about people, people like that, is that, and like me, I never tried to influence my kids' religion or politics. Mm-hmm. They just grew up being good people. They're just perfectly good people.
And that's all you can ask for.
That's all you can ask for, and they're smart. And so, and you get this impression, people have this impression of people who I guess you were privileged, I guess. Some people would say you were privileged, and some people would say that you were what would be the criticisms? What are people in public school?
They usually think that we're antisocial weirdos who never had any friends and all that kind of thing, which of course untrue.
But also you're not schooled enough in politics, right? Because the teachers are members of these unions, and these unions tell their members who to vote for. It's a political machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
The NEA is basically a big political machine,
like it or not, it tends to be.
The reason I know this is because I was married. I'm married to a retired teacher of 30 years, and even before that, was married to another teacher for 10 years. So I, like you, have a lot of not experience, but I've been exposed to it. And my wife was so happy. She was more happy about retiring last year because of the atmosphere, not the kids. She misses the kids really. She cried when and of course, she still goes back and helps them out whenever they need it. But the point is that education is probably one of those things that will never, at this point, I don't think, get right again in this country.
Yeah, that's why there's so many people looking at alternatives to public education. I think that there should be as many options as possible, personally.
And that's why you have that side of the fence fighting, like school choice, vouchers, that kind of thing. Tooth and nail.
All the time.
That's a huge fight, I think it ties into the attitude, the overall mentality, psyche of the people who are involved in these, not just protests, but the rioting and, all that.
Yeah, the rioting is definitely a problem. One thing that I think should be noted, though, about the protests is that I see a lot of people from a lot of different political backgrounds, both left and right, coming together when it comes to the issue of police brutality. And I think that's something that we do need, is unity behind a topic, and I think that's very positive to see.
And that's a good note to end on, because I agree 100%. Okay, I think, and that's what I've tried to say this whole time, is that there's two different issues, right?
Right.
Police brutality is an issue that has to be addressed, and the disproportionate, any kind of if any kind of departmental systemic racism obviously has to be rooted out.
Yes. I think it is important to look at the movement with a critical eye, for sure. I try not to play favorites because I can't.
No, I'm not trying to get you to play favorites. I'm agreeing with you, really, to on the most part, but that the people who are trying to make positive change, there's a broad spectrum of involved there politically,
for sure.
But the negative side of it seems to all lean in one direction. I'm going to say that, and I think that's a fair assessment.
I think that you're, for the most part, right. Yes.
We've been going for what, 2 hours? So
has it been that long? Wow.
Well, it's probably not that long, but I do appreciate it, your time, Russell, and
sure.
I'm really happy to talk with you. This is fun. Hope you'll come back sometime. And,
anytime. Just send the invite and I'm here.
I'm going to save some time this afternoon for editing here. So.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Russell. And
yes, sir.
I'll hear you on the radio in the morning.
All right. I appreciate it.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.